How we think and what we say about our money has a huge impact on our financial success. I invite you to say this with me. I expect lavish abundance in every aspect of my life. Specifically today, I expect, recognize and welcome lavish abundance, and I am grateful for it. The U.S. Olympic team actually has psychologists on staff to help their athletes envision winning. They work on, if you ever notice like before the Olympics or before a big sporting event, you'll see, I always think of the gymnasts doing this. They'll stand on the side and they're kind of walking through their routine. They're picturing themselves doing it perfectly. I imagine they're picturing getting 10s, right? Exactly what they want to have happen. Someone was telling me a story about how their kids' swim team in high school had an Olympic coach come and coach them for a short period of time. He had these kids practice winning. What would you do if you looked up and you saw your score was the lowest time on the board and these kids would jump up and, how would they practice winning? Well, think about how you would practice winning financially. There is so much scary information out there right now that we have no control over, right? Just turn on the TV for a short amount of time. But we can control what we think about. When we're really nervous about things, one of the best things you can possibly do is to express your gratitude. Think about what you're most grateful for. These are two people in my life that I am incredibly grateful for. That's my son Benji and my daughter Amy. This was on our exotic trip to Peru, Illinois, which I was very grateful for. One thing I do with my kids every night is we share 5 things that we're grateful for. And they say sometimes things like, I'm grateful for my PlayStation, and sometimes they say really beautiful things. I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for my teachers, I'm grateful we're so blessed. One night my son said to me, Mom, I'm so grateful you and Daddy are so magnanimous and that we live in this utopia and our life is so fortuitous. And I looked at him, and those were the 5th grade spelling words that week. I noticed that my profession does a lot of telling people what their goals should be, like, oh, you should be saving for retirement, and you should be saving for your kids' education. And for a lot of people, those are really important goals. But they're not everybody's goals, or might not be the most important goals, right? Maybe it's to change careers, maybe it's to make a big difference in the world. But it's important to think about what your values are, and specifically around money. There's a small country in Asia called Bhutan. And in Bhutan, in the late 70s, the king of Bhutan made a decree. And he said, instead of focusing on the typical measures of economic growth like we do in our country, gross domestic product, GDP, and gross national product, GNP, they would instead focus on their gross national happiness level. So they came up with tenets to quantify this, things like care for the environment and sustaining their heritage. And it started me thinking, well, what if we started to look at our gross personal happiness level? And instead of just looking at the numbers at the bottom of our balance sheet, we were looking at what really made us happy. So as we're talking today, I'd like you to be thinking about what would be your own tenets of gross personal happiness. My daughter I was picking her up one day from Sunday school, and she threw her papers in the front of the car, and she was in the back seat. And I look at them, and they were writing prayers. They were having a family dinner in a couple weeks, and these kids were all writing prayers. And I look at it, and I read, Dear God, thank you for my mommy. And I said, Amy, that is so sweet. And she looked at me like, what are you talking about, Mom? And I looked at it again, and it said, Dear God, thank you for my money.